Hi everyone, and welcome to the 14th episode of the World of Work podcast. In today's episode, we have Velani Mboweni, who is the co-founder and CEO of Lula. He's a board member and director of WESGRO, and he is a Harambeans Fellow. I hope you enjoyed today's episode and that you learned something from it. Hi Velani, how are you?
Good, thanks. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. So Velani studied a Bachelor of Commerce in Philosophy, Politics, and Economics at UCT, and then he did a Bachelor of Arts Honors in Political Science Adverts, and he did a postgraduate diploma in Business Administration at Wits Business School, and he's currently the CEO and founder of Lula. How was your time at UCT?
Wow, my time at UCT was quite the blur. It was my first time living outside of home, and it was the first time I'd seen 25,000 people on campus at one go. So it was a very, very big difference to, going to school in Johannesburg. But my time there was very memorable. I remember living in Clarina's residence for 2 years. I remember the jammy. I remember Super Sandwich on campus. I remember a lot of things, and particularly just how my entire world was broadened. The horizon completely changed, and that was really exciting. And many, many great, wonderful memories. Playing sport for the university team, soccer in particular, playing in the Res League, as well as serving on campus, and things like Shorko, the RAG team. I was part of the Student Christian Fellowship as well. And a lot of the cool things, consulting club, InvestSoc, you name it. I was very, very active as a young student there.
What would you say was your biggest takeaway from your time at UCT?
I think friendships were very meaningful that I learned, that I obviously picked up at UCT. I would also argue that being able to think in a very practical sense and analyze the world in a very, very broad spectrum really, really helped with UCT. And also being able to fend for myself, right? I think when you're in primary school or high school, they always tell you what to do, whereas in university, they kind of tell you what, how things should be done and how you should go about thinking about things. So in university, you're always taught about applying knowledge, whereas in high school and primary school, you're taught to just repeat knowledge. So I think that's one of the fundamental things that changed in my life once I attended, UCT. And I think, yeah, being in a different city, being in Cape Town when I was born in Johannesburg, every single step I would have taken in Johannesburg is probably 4 times smaller than what I would have taken in Cape Town, given the amount of factors that come together to make you live as a student there, whether it be, fending for yourself, paying for your own groceries, finding your own transportation, and just taking accountability for yourself as a young person really made a big difference in my time at UCT.
Mm. And then you went on to do like honors in political science. Is there a reason why you chose to do your honors in political science and not like economics or philosophy?
Yeah, so I think I was always convicted with the plight of ordinary people. And I think when I got in for PPE at UCT, I was actually originally going to WITS to study aeronautical engineering, and I got in for that. But the big thing that I really wanted to unpack is, why do people suffer? I wanted to understand why the world is the way it is, and politics really helped me get deeper into that. So PPE really are the three disciplines that help us understand why the world functions the way it is, and you can almost argue that politics and economics are two sides of the same coin. But the political element for me is really critical, because it's, the first thing you learn in politics is that politics is a disorganized majority being controlled by an organized minority. And so I really wanted to just dig deeper into the meaning of that, and really just major in how understanding how the state and the way society is organized can be influenced to enable people to prosper effectively. So that's why I chose that discipline over either philosophy or economics.
Oh, wow, that's amazing. And I see like your thesis was facilitating development through entrepreneurship in neoliberal South Africa. What are the politics and actions that make a difference? Was there any reason why you chose that in particular?
Yeah, so I think if I had to appeal to one of the phrases that I understood from a young age was, if you give a man a fish, you feed him for a day, and if you teach him how to fish, you feed him for a lifetime. And I thought of looking at that concept, you know, in my thesis or my honors year, to really try and figure out how can the state or entrepreneurship be used to empower people to flourish, rather than asking for handouts and saying the state must be the sole custodian of taking care of people. But what are the things that we can be implemented to just empower people to fend for themselves and be more sustainable? That's the reason why I went into that particular stream of focus on my study.
That's amazing. And speaking about entrepreneurship, so you founded Lula Loop in 2016, which is a trusted transport service that connects corporate commuters to safe, affordable, and sustainable shuttles across South Africa. And how's that journey been?
That journey has been arguably the most eventful string of events that has taken place over my life over the past 9 years, actually. So the fact of the matter is, I actually started Lula when I was at UCT. Um, the original genesis of the time is that it was started when I was in my apartment in Observatory. I was having a nap. I woke up and looked over Main Road in Observatory, and it was just chaos. And a voice whispered in my ear and said, "Get organized and solve this problem." I kid you not, that was literally what was in my ear. And I just started writing all sorts of ways in which, how do you basically address this challenge? And the fundamental view was that without access to transport, you can't access economic opportunities. And without those opportunities, you cannot solve for poverty, unemployment, and inequality. So we got working on it. I was obviously very naive. I'd never started a tech company before. I'd never studied transportation. I was, in my final year of PPE, and I just had a little bit of time on my hands then, and that led to what we have today. So, the original concept wasn't what it is today. We've actually pivoted the business twice, but we have still addressed the same fundamental problem. And be that as it may, we've survived the COVID pandemic, we've survived the recession, we've been really blessed to have raised millions of dollars in capital, employed, dozens of people, served over 250 businesses, processed over 400,000 rides, and, just actively scaling quite aggressively. I mean, we've grown in the last 3 years, an average of 4x year on year. And this is despite recessions and pandemics, etc. And I think I've, just really fortunate that we have a good pool of driver partners, over 1,000 across South Africa, and just really building a business quietly, but adding value to the enterprise segment of South Africa. So that's how the journey's been. But I would definitely say that it has had a lot of, good highs, but an incredible amount of big lows. So it hasn't been smooth sailing. But as we know, a smooth sea never made a skillful sailor.
Mm. You're actually the first person that I'm speaking to that is an entrepreneur. So this is definitely going out to the kids who maybe gotten that whisper or maybe a dream or that bug inside of them. How did you balance? Because you're saying, okay, this was your final year of PPE. This is when you started thinking about it and putting it together. And then afterwards, you went on to do post grad. You went on to do honors in political science. How did you balance? And then obviously like other work in between. How did you balance growing Lula and then also finishing your degree, doing other degrees and internships and jobs, etc.?
Yeah, so for me, I think, I had done a lot of internships prior to starting Lula. In fact, I interned in the US, in Washington, D.C., through a program called SAWIP, which was run across the university campuses. I'd worked in family businesses before. I had started a logistics business on campus in first year, where I was helping students deliver their assignments after hours when printing facilities weren't working. I had started a nonprofit organization during my UCT years. So I was always a very curious guy. And beyond just being curious, I'd always put action to my curiosity. And sometimes that wasn't just about, raising money, building a product, and like going to market really quickly. For me, my action was simply writing things down. And when I'd write things down, it would spark a lot more curiosity. So I write things down in my little journal, research the problem in greater detail, just constantly reading and writing nonstop and asking a lot of questions to prospective customers, a lot of questions to, people that I think could be part of the value chain, and ultimately got to a point where I thought, this is something that I can eventually do. What I must say though is, starting a business is very risky, and you really don't know everything until you start walking the journey. So I had to get rid of this idea of having the perfect position to start at. And so what I then did to supplement that was I kept on studying. So studied my postgrad, studied my honors, but all the while in my spare time, I'd keep engaging with prospective customers, prospective partners, etc. And then it got to a point where after I finished studying, the only thing left for me to do was either get a real job or pursue this Lula thing. And I thought, look, I'm tired of pursuing Lula and studying. So what would happen if I've stopped studying and I just kept pursuing this Lula thing? And that's what I did. And eventually it grew from just being me to meeting my co-founder to eventually hiring over 30 people and building a business that was quite, in the grand scheme of things, successful. And so, yeah, I think it's definitely not really a black and white decision, but one that has to progressively over time make the right steps, but then you get conviction, strong conviction where you say, all right, this is the path where I'm going, and that's where we go. So that's how I eventually went from idea to building what we're doing, and doing so with other things in the background, which eventually fell apart.
That's amazing. And I'm seeing like throughout your time, from when you got the whisper and you were looking outside of the window and you saw that there was a problem, to when you were doing your honors in political science and you did politics and you did what you did because you wanted to help people, let's say, be able to fund their own lives, help them plant a seed in order for them to grow on their own. And throughout, and you also have a slogan about like serve the people, so I can see that you're constantly thinking about like the how you can help people. um would you say that this is a big factor in like why you standing today, like why you keep doing what you're doing, why you keep waking up every morning even though it's tough?
Yeah, I definitely think there's a couple of things. Look, they like to say that talent is universal, but opportunity is not distributed evenly. And so there are a lot of people who have the potential, but they don't have the opportunity to do so. Whether that be the opportunity to build something or the opportunity to express their voice. So I find myself in a very unique position where I've gone to school, I've studied, I've built a network, and was fortunate enough to build a business and create jobs. And there are a lot of people who could be solving the problem that we're solving, but they just don't have the opportunity, the time, the means to do so. And so I consider that quite a significant blessing and privilege to be able to do so. And I would never want to waste that opportunity. So getting up and being able to help people and serve people and solve their problems is really important for me. The other thing is that I'm just also not a person who gives up, right? So if I put my mind to something and I start pursuing what needs to be done, it's very unlikely that I'll just give up, even if I'm bored or even if things seem a little bit hard. So I'm someone who's very resilient and puts things forward. But also at the same time, I also believe that it's just really important to be optimistic. Living in a country like South Africa where everyone is complaining and complaining and complaining, in those complaints lies opportunity. and not an opportunity to emigrate to Australia, but an opportunity to, build something meaningful that can help those who are complaining actually solve a problem that is worth pursuing. So I think that for me is critical in how one has gone about building the business, building the life one wants to lead. And that just keeps me motivated. I think also, it's weird. We had our birthday at Lula yesterday, celebrating technically 9 years, but we said 8 years. But there was four things that really stood out for me, and that was understanding how you find meaning in life. The first is, one, you need to feel connection, right? You need to be connected, whether it's a deep connection, a meaningful connection. People need to find connection. The second thing is that people need to find progress, right? They need to find progress, and everything that they're doing on a daily basis has to kind of move them forward in a direction that is better than where they were before. The third thing is that people need to feel control, right? So you need to have control over your choices, control over your stability, control over your life for the most part of things. Of course, we can't control everything, but we need to feel control. And ultimately, the fourth thing is you need to find belonging to something that is bigger than you, right? And for me, that belonging to something that's bigger than you is tackling a problem so big that not Velani himself can't do this. You have to be able to gather resources, gather community, gather so many people that once we get there, it will feel so meaningful that it has been achieved, but it's not just about you as an individual. So I think those are four things that give us meaning and really speaks to why essentially one gets up every day to build what he builds.
Mm, that's amazing. And happy eighth birthday, or technically ninth birthday to Lula. Yo, that's incredible, hey, like all these years. I just want to touch on leadership. So so I'm a project manager for a portfolio at InvestSoc, and so I have a subcommittee, and I know, like, in compared to obviously what you're doing, it's very small, but it's I you know, like when people look at you, like, are waiting for you to give them an answer, and sometimes like you don't even know yourself, it's like quite hectic. I'm like, this is the first time I've had, like, in my opinion, like a really real leadership role, and I love it a lot, but I didn't expect it to be like this hectic, especially like, with life happening on the side, but you also need to always get up and you always need to answer people, etc. And you now managing, compared to me now, you are now managing like dozens of people. You have, I think I saw the other day, like Lula Durban as well, Lula Cape Town. How has that leadership journey been? Like, how does it feel to have like everyone wait for you, when they don't have the answers, come to you?
Wow. Okay. So there's a couple of things, and I think leadership for me started way before Lula. And in fact, it started way before university, probably started around primary school. You get appointed to be a monitor or classroom monitor. You get appointed to lead a soccer team. You get appointed to, serve on like the Interact Club, or community service board. You get all those opportunities to serve. I believe leadership is servanthood, right? So you get the opportunity to serve people and do things that are either unpopular at the time or necessary at the time. And so I think having experienced leadership at a young age and really understood that leadership may not just be a cool thing, but it's actually more of a responsibility that you have to people in society that rely on your unique skill set or your gift at a particular point in time to lead them. But what's also critical that I've learned over time, especially now growing Lula, is that my job works in two ways. The first is that my job is actually to make a very small set of high quality decisions in the company. So it's not necessarily about every day waking up and like handling finance or giving talks. It's really about, if I look at 12 months in a year, how many high quality decisions can I make that fundamentally pushes the company in the right direction and actually propels us into the future ahead of our competition. So that's a very important thing, is making high quality decisions, and a very small set of them that really propels the company forward. But the second thing is, how do you empower people to be self-sustainable, right? Because there are a lot of issues that happen on the ground in tech, in transportation, that I may have an answer to, but if they have to keep coming to me for answers, then I'm actually failing as a leader, right? It must always be that you equip your people with the tools, the information, the framework, the skill set to make decisions on their own. If they are completely stumped, and there's nowhere else to go, then they can come to me. And so, of course, we have tiered structure. There's like the board, there's the exco, there's senior managers, there's managers, and there's like entry-level people. So you have to keep equipping people at different levels to be able to, unpack what they need to unpack. So that's what leadership has taught me, but it's also important for us to be honest. There are many times where I had no answers. There are many times where I had to be vulnerable with my team and say, look, guys, I'm not sure if we're going to make payroll this month, but by the grace of God, we made it. And authentic leadership requires you to be vulnerable, requires you to be honest, and requires you to be transparent. Ultimately, I also understood that because our business, it's not just Velani's business. This is a business owned by a string of investors who are public institutions, private institutions, international institutions. So whilst the idea came from me as a student, it's grown into its own identity. And so if I am not a good enough leader for the business, the board and the shareholders can actually decide that Velani needs to step aside. In fact, to put it bluntly, they can fire me. And so, and it's not even a personal thing. If they need a certain leader in a certain time and I'm not the right person, they can actively pull that plug on me. So understanding that leadership really is a responsibility, it's an honor, and not a divine right that you have to keep working for and serving people and solving their problems as time progresses.
Well, I think so far you're doing a pretty good job. You did mention you've had over 400,000 rides, millions of dollars in investments, and also that you're going 4 times a year, 4 times more a year. So this is amazing. I just want to ask, what advice would you give to students right now who are in the position that you were in when you were in your final year, who want to start a business, who are currently pursuing entrepreneurship and coming from all different backgrounds? Like, what have you learned now that maybe you would do differently, or maybe that you would tell your younger self to do?
Yeah. So I love the question. The first is an honest reflection that there's no perfect way or perfect time to start. That you just have to get started in some shape or form. For me, that getting started entailed just writing a lot, reading a lot, and asking questions. And the more I asked questions and the more I wrote things down, the more things became a lot clearer for me. The second thing is, as a student, it is you're in a very pivotal point in your life where you don't really have responsibilities like a wife or kids or major bills to pay. You literally have a good portion of time to think and make decisions. As life progresses, you don't have too much time to actually just think. So as a student, that's the perfect time for you to really consider taking a risk. Because as students, you don't really have like bonds and credit cards and whatever. Like, now's the time where you can actually take a risk. The third thing is, I would definitely obsess over a problem that is worth solving, because if you can solve a problem that is worth solving, you can ultimately build a meaningful business over time. Which brings me to what I like to refer to as like 4 key steps to being a successful entrepreneur. As I mentioned, the first one is solving a problem. So can you find a problem worth solving? The second is, can you mobilize resources to address this problem? This could be, raising money, finding people, getting resources or raw materials, or building a software product, or building a partnerships model to address this problem. The third aspect then is, can you create value after mobilizing the resources and addressing the problem? And by creating value is, if you're selling ice cream in a hot summer's day to people in the middle of the desert, that ice cream is creating value to the users, right? But if you're selling, ice to an Eskimo in the middle of Antarctica, there's probably no value that you're creating. That's the third thing. The fourth thing is, can you capture value, right? Capturing value basically means that, can you make a profit on every single item sold or every unit serviced, etc. So if you cost 8 Rand to produce something and you sell it at 12 Rand, is the market holding that you can definitely command that 4 Rand? So if you can do all 4 of those things, at the bare minimum, you are technically a successful entrepreneur. The rest of that is just about increasing distribution, lots of marketing and getting customers to talk. If you get those 4 things done, I think you're a successful entrepreneur. So I think on that basis, that's the advice I would give to anyone in, my position way back then. But just get started, because life will get a lot more complicated as you grow up. And being a student is actually the perfect time to take these kind of risks and, exercise things. Because you get a corporate job, you become comfortable, you get married, you have kids, you're like, hey, I don't want these guys to know that I don't have a salary for 3 months. Now is the perfect time. And I'm speaking from experience. If I did not start Lula when I did, I don't think there would be a Lula today.
Wow, that's amazing. And yeah, get started is, I think, amazing advice. I don't have a company, but if you don't start, it'll never come. I just want to talk about how you were on Forbes. So he was on Forbes 30 under 30. And one thing about you is you will not like speak about your achievements. So he's even like laughing right now. So, but I think it's such a big achievement. So I think you should. Can you talk to us about that? How did that feel? How did you feel?
Well, every time someone mentions an achievement, I kind of blush, because I think I always feel incredibly indebted to the people who've helped me get this far. And I really am grateful to God for, the grace he's given me. Because if I looked at my qualifications, if I looked at my, self in the mirror, there's definitely so many other people who could have done this instead of me. So when someone talks about, oh, you Forbes 30 under 30, this and that, I just blush, man. And I think really it's God's grace and the people who've been around me. Um, and yeah, I'm grateful that people can recognize the work that we're doing and recognize the efforts. I must say, because I see a lot of the bad stuff that goes on in building a business more than I see the successes, it sometimes does feel a bit hard to take, recognition for this. But I'm grateful. I'm grateful at the end of the day to be able to add value to society. And if my story can help someone get the confidence to try, and that can make them make a difference in their society, their community, and their lives, then go ahead, tell the world about it. But I really think it should be a let's call it a light post to helping catalyze people to make their choices to become entrepreneurs and solve problems and serve people. But yeah, ultimately it just, yeah, I don't think I'm anything special, if I'm very honest with you.
I love that. You were recently also appointed as a board member and director of WESGRO. Uh, how how's that been?
Yeah, so we actually I have my first board meeting with WESGRO at the end of this month. So I'm super excited. For those who don't know, WESGRO is the provincial government's agency for investment, trade, and tourism for the Western Cape. Um, and yeah, it's a very successful entity. And I am super excited to just learn from so many people. I think the responses that I got from people on LinkedIn, or people uh, messaging me on Instagram, it was quite humbling. Even people I had no idea, like, had my number, or people who were in contact with me, it was just really humbling to see the kind of vote of confidence that brought. But yeah, I am, like I say, like, I'm ready to roll up my sleeves and just get to work. At the end of the day, everything that I'm doing right now, in my life is really to empower other people. So if whatever comes out of the WESGRO opportunity, I want to be able to, extend the opportunities to so many more people who typically would not get their voices heard. And so I'm excited to serve the government. I'm excited to serve people of the country and the province. And yeah, just really, really happy. Really, really happy. And again, there are so many people who could be in that position, and I'm humbled by the opportunity.
And lastly, I just wanted to ask, how can upcoming entrepreneurs set themselves apart in order to get funding? I know like South Africa, the economy right now isn't amazing, and there's many people who are young and want to start businesses and need funding. What can they do to get funding or to increase their chances of getting funding?
Yeah, it's a very great question. And, I could talk about this for a very long period of time. The first thing is I would say is fundraising is a marathon, not a sprint. So whenever you think about raising money for your business, you need to understand that you're probably going to need to raise money a number of times. Um, so when you have that in mind, you need to be able to tell a story that is not just about what you're going to achieve now in the next 6 months, but also include what you're going to achieve in 2 years and in 5 years and maybe even 10 years, and be able to document what your requirement for funding will be, hopefully, over that period of time. So maybe you need R1 million now to build the proof of concept. And then later on, you'll need 15 million Rand to scale the business. And then you'll maybe need 100 million Rand to really take over the market. Be able to tell that story very consecutively and say why that story is worth believing in. The second thing is when you need to understand, when going about fundraising, you need to understand the fundraising landscape. So you need to know which type of entities give funding to your stage business, whether it's an idea stage, early proof of concept, a little bit of traction or scale up stage. It's very important to understand who is writing checks for which stage and specifically what's their mandate. So there's no point speaking to, a venture capitalist if your business is going to be profitable over the first few weeks or few months, right? Because venture capital doesn't work that way. You also need to understand what type of financing you need. Do you need debt, equity, quasi-equity? Is it a loan that you need? You kind of figure that stuff out. And then once you understand that funding match and that funding mandate, you then need to be smart about who you speak to fund. So if you're looking for seed stage money, but you start speaking to guys who are growth stage, you're wasting both people's time. Ultimately, I would highly recommend speaking to other founders or early stage businesses who have been in that journey before for them to point you in the right direction. I think a lot of the money that I raised in the early days came because another founder introduced me to that investor, and that brought a good sense of credibility to the discussion. Ultimately, I think when you look at fundraising as a activity, not everyone has the time of day to give to entrepreneurs. So you need to be able to master your 30-second pitch, your 60-second pitch, your 2-minute pitch, your 5-minute pitch, and ultimately your 10-minute pitch. And so when you speak to someone and you say, hey, I'm speaking to Hlubi, Hlubi is an angel investor, you tell them your name, the name of your company, the problem you're solving, how you're doing things differently, why it matters, why right now, and what's your ask. So being able to master that almost like the back of your hand is super important. And then once you do that, just keep the people curious. So you don't have to tell them everything at one go. It's just like if you go on a date, right? You can't tell the person you're going on a date everything about you on the first date. You got to tell them something in the first date, maybe go on a second date, tell them about maybe your political views. And then on a third date, you maybe reveal that you have 6 toes instead of 5 or something. Like you got to reveal things gradually and you keep the investor curious, and eventually they'll have some conviction and they'll probably invest in your business. And if someone says no, don't take it personal. Take it to the chin, ask for some feedback, and just keep getting better.
That's amazing. Very good advice. Thank you so much, Velani, for taking the time out of your Saturday evening to talk to us. I have no doubt for real that anyone listening to this is going to leave here without learning a thing. I have learned so much, and I'm not an entrepreneur. So thank you so much, and I'm wishing you all the best on Lula. I know it's going to do great things. I know you're going to do great things. And yeah, thank you.
Anytime, Phoebe. Have a great weekend and see you soon.
Bye. I hope that you enjoyed today's episode and that you learned something from it. Please remember that the InvestSoc Times launch night dinner is on the 4th of October. InvestSoc's annual gala dinner is on the 13th of October. And you can secure your financial future with Crew Invest next week on the 18th of September 2023. I hope to see you again next week. Bye.